Hey everyone, welcome back to Kalloc Studios' Fuzor Workflow series. If you haven't had a chance to watch the previous video, you can find it by clicking the link in the description below. In the last video, I got to share with you Fuzor's powerful design capabilities and use them to breathe new life into my project, as well as help give it form and function. And this time around, I'll be looking to get my newly revitalized project ready for design approval. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the design approval process, you know that can mean a great many things, not the least of which is spotting design errors, checking for ADA compliance, and sometimes even looking for ways to optimize your project in the process. So a good rule of thumb is to always start with a project walkthrough, which is what I'm going to do right now. Let's go ahead and kick over to Avatar Control. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the Avatar Controls and adjust the height. Now if you kind of want a cursory glance at something like, say, there's a big piece of equipment that's going to be rolled by every day, it happens to be 10 feet tall. It's a nice easy way to check for clearance. You can get more accuracy out of the measurement tools, but if you just want sort of a quick glance at it, it's a fun way to do it. I like the realism of keeping it about my height, which is about 6 even, so I'm going to just make that directly 72. There we go. That also gives me a nice kind of an eye level. I'll zoom in a little bit. Give me an eye level perspective there. Also, I mentioned ADA compliance. There's also a wheelchair mode for the avatar. So let's start out by checking the planetarium. Oop, looks like I may have a clearance issue there to begin with. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and hop out of the chair here and walk on through. Yeah, so what it looks like we got here is there's a structural beam interfering with the rest of your construction. So first off, let me just go ahead and use the measurement tools. I'm going to break out the 2-point measurement tool and I'm going to check this thing for clearance. ADA says you need 32 inches of clearance. That's 2'9", so that's 24 and 9, so that's 33. So you're clear on a wheelchair. Maybe a bit of a tight fit, but it's there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit escape to get out of measurement tools, and I'm going to go ahead and annotate this beam. So let's call this conflict username. I'll just call myself Inspector Z. Sounds mysterious. And we'll call this design conflict. Oops, conflict. And but since it does meet the ADA standards there, you can say it's okay, or you can see if it's possible to design around this. And you can go ahead and save that out. Okay, let's go ahead and take a walk downstairs. Actually, there's one more thing I want to add to that, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my annotation tools. I can actually click it right here. There's also the possibility that it may not be a structural beam, maybe a temporary support while the rest of it gets put in. So I can also make a note about that. Is this temp or permanent? Can it be removed? There you go. Then I'll just jump right back to my avatar. Now I'm going to take a quick run downstairs. I do not condone running downstairs, so for all you kids watching this, don't do this at home. So this area here, this is kind of supposed to be like a main exhibition hall. You can set up displays and other things in here, but one of the other ideas that was put forth was, what if this was instead a cafe? And so I've already preset design options. That's something we went over in the last video. I'm going to go ahead and kick up the cafe. So this is what it would look like with the cafe in there, but there's always the possibility that since it is a cafe, you're going to need certain things piped in and out of there. So what you can actually do, I'm going to go switch over to free camera mode real quick, is you can even annotate in your design. And like say this sink, and you can put an annotation, give it a title. Let's just put the title sink. I'm going to leave the username category out for a while, and I'm just going to say, can this, what is it? Not can this location. Can water and drainage be to Again, water and drainage be piped to this location, and that's something I can save. And then what I'll do is I'll go into the annotations, and I'll save it out, and I can send that, and it can be opened up again in Revit or in Fuzor. So it's great as a design tool as well. Okay, so I've done my site walkthrough. I've checked for any blaring errors, made annotations of them. I've also checked the feasibility of some of my design options, and asked any of the appropriate questions. And I've saved out those annotations to deliver them to the appropriate parties. So, next stop on my hit list is I'm going to do a clash detection. And a good rule of thumb: always start your clash detection by checking against structural. So just sort of give a better idea of what we'll be looking at. This isn't required for clash detection, but I like to do it just for visualization purposes. It helps me understand better what I'm looking at. So right now I've just kept the pipes, ducts, and structural visible, and I'm changing up the colors a little bit just to give me some high visibility on that. Okay, so these are the basic systems I'll be testing against each other. Again, like I said, test against structural first, 99.99999 etc. % of the time. You will not be able to touch structural in the slightest, so do that before testing systems against each other. So, going into the Clash Manager, I'm going to go ahead and hit New. So, let's go ahead and select our structural, column and framing, and let's put that against the pipes and ducts. So structural against MVP. Tolerance, imperial, let's leave that in metric, 100th of a meter, and go ahead and hit run test. So less than a quarter of a second, 108 clashes detected. And just to get a good idea where those are, I'm going to go ahead and hit highlight. Just so you guys know, you do have the ability to click wireframe if you prefer that. For me, that can be a little bit cluttered. I kind of prefer the transparency view. And I'll isolate these two just so I can get a good idea where they are. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click the first clash. Let's give myself a better view over here. And let's resume that there. And as you can see, as I'm clicking my clashes, the yellow shows that I've seen them but haven't resolved them. Also, if you get yourself in a good camera angle here, you can click another clash, then come back and it'll save that camera angle. It's great for when you generate a report and you need to be able to get a clear visual. Now, just FYI, you do have the ability, assuming you are the MEP guy or gal or whatever, you do have the ability to refit, and by doing that it will actually clear that clash and any associated clash, like so. Now personally, coming from a construction management standpoint, I really would not recommend that unless you are the MEP person. You don't know what disconnects you may be making, or even what additional clashes you may be creating. So in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this out to send to my MEP. And I'll save it in HTML format. I'm going to go MEP versus structural and hit save. And the reason I like HTML is because what it'll do is it'll generate all the pertinent data, and then it will actually process thumbnails and put them next to that data. And like I said, you get that into a certain orientation, it'll save that orientation for your thumbnail. So this is a report I can actually save, and it's actually saved right now, and I can go ahead and send this out to my MEP. And from here I'm just going to go ahead for the time being and hit end test. Now that I've finished doing my walkthrough and my clash detection, I'm going to go ahead and run some light reports. So before I even do that, let's go ahead and kick this down to night. So lighting is something that's very important to any facility. It's going to be based on how much daylight you get, how much illumination you need on what's in your building. And it's always good to know, for engineers or for anyone else too, whether or not your lighting is up to code. If you have sufficient illumination, if you have dark spots you need to check out, you may need to add lights or otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and run a quick lighting report. So over to my measurement tools, and let's go here. I'm going to make this metric, and I'm going to go ahead and click on lighting report. And as you can see, I can adjust my height and my spacing. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the first floor gift shop. So as you can see, that's where my grid is going to be for measurement. It's about right. Let's leave it right about there for eye level. It's a good place to measure the light. And if I want to, I can actually adjust the bounding box of my room. So let's actually kick the top up about another 100 centimeters. There we go. Oops. So there's my bounding box for my room. And calculate with sunlight off. Height's good. And I'll go ahead and add that to my light report batch. Now that I've got everything set up, I'm just going to run this one room for now. I'm going to go ahead and click Generate. And let's save that to the desktop. And Fuzor is going to go ahead and kick out a lighting report for me for this room. And once Fuzor finishes running the lighting report, it's going to go ahead and kick out of the main console, and it'll bring up your lighting report in this format. So you'll be able to see your units, your measurement height, and you'll be able to assess to see where you might need to add light or possibly bring light back. Looks like you got some warm spots right around here where you got a lot of light toward the center, which is actually a good thing for this. Is supposed to be kind of a storefront, so you're going to want to draw people into the middle, give it the highest light. Back in here, looks like there could be some light to be added. Same over here if you're trying to draw people to merchandise over by your sill. So it lets you know where you can add and where you can pull back light. And of course back here there's the obvious zero placement that's directly behind your soda machines. So thus far I've been primarily focused around the Science Center area over here. But for this next part, I'm going to take a detour over to the parking structure and perform some rain analysis. So let's go ahead and go over to my weather controls and let's crank that all the way up. Get myself a nice rainstorm going. Now what this is going to allow me to do is check for gaps, penetrations, separations, basically places the rain might come through. So it's just going to be a really quick look. So we're good here, we're okay over here, good, good. And as you can see, the rain is coming through the gaps in the solar panels, and that's to be expected. Now another thing I can do with rain analysis is, let's say I'm someplace like Florida or any place that's inclined to driving rains. I can crank up my rain angle. Let's make it come from the east. And as you can see, the rain is just basically coming straight through that opening. You also notice that the shield on this side is actually blocking it from coming in. But what this tells me is if I have any parking or otherwise on this side, it's not really feasible to move the spaces, especially in a parking structure where you have a lot of tight tolerance. So what I can do to mitigate that is I can actually add an awning to basically come out from this side, and that should bring the rain angle back to where this edge is. And that's a really useful tool, especially if this is the kind of weather that you're prone to. Now when I started the video I had mentioned trying to find ways to optimize the project. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to use Fuzor's sun study and a couple of the foliage tools to try to do just that. Now what the sun study is going to help me do is, well, it's going to help me do quite a few things. I can determine where light and shadow are going to fall. That'll help me determine how long my lights in my building are going to be on. I can also determine whether or not those shadows are going to fall over anything else. And it'll also help me in terms of the foliage too. So let's go over that real quick. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change this because I want my facility to be in San Diego. And if it recognizes your city, it'll just give you the latitude and longitude right there. As you can see, the shadows have already changed up there. Let's throw this back into February, see what the long shadows are looking like. There we go. Now in the previous video I kind of went through the sun slider briefly. But the nice thing is, now that I've set this for position and day of the year, I can actually see what effect that's going to have. Let's actually bring that to June. Let's try the hottest time of the year, because that's really when this is going to matter. So San Diego, a lot of shorter shadows during that. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to go ahead and hit this on time lapse for 2 times. So it's about 5. Let's go ahead and jump up it here. Let's start here. So 6 a.m. Looking like we're getting pretty heavy sunlight on this for most of the day, so yeah, it's a good way. It's a good way to determine what kind of plant life you want to put in there. Desert plant life would probably be really good in there because you're going to get mostly sun throughout the day. Let's go ahead and jump this ahead again. It doesn't look like I'm going to have... Oh, well, there's some there early in the morning. What are we looking at here toward early evening? Looks like we're going to get some sunlight in there, but for the most part my facility is fairly well covered, so I don't have to worry too much about the sun heating a lot of it, except perhaps over here on the side of the planetarium. So that's just something to consider when it comes to heating and cooling. Also, I'm going to get a lot of sunlight throughout the day, but not a lot of it is going to fall directly through the windows, which means for exhibits and otherwise, I'm probably going to be having my lights on for most of the day. So just something to consider when it comes to power draw. Also, where I might want to put my lighting, how much of it I want to use during the day, or if I can maybe even slap a dimmer on it. Okay, let's jump over to the foliage real quick. There's a couple of things I want to do with this, and I can even use them in conjunction with the sun study too. One of them, this is actually more toward design analysis than anything else, but for me, I wanted to have color in all 4 seasons of the year. So, start out with spring. This is kind of what I'm looking like. Planted some Bohenia here, some cassia out front. That's actually for later in the year. So we get some Japanese cherry over here. I believe these are honey locust, and some Kosa dogwood over here. And what I can do is, this is what it looks like in spring. I want color for all times of the year, so this is summer is going to be primarily green, and this is and there's a couple of things that will be upcoming later, so I'll show you those in a second. So that's why I put the cassia in here to add some yellow, basically on your approach over here. Look, there's my avatar standing there looking intelligent, and not so much anymore. Kick it into fall. And the thing is, a lot of times, if you have some place that is like a museum or something, and it's a facility that people come to, sometimes they'll come back just to walk through the garden if it's something that's eye-catching enough. So a lot of color can really help in that fashion. And one thing also to consider is winter. Winter, these are a lot of deciduous trees. You will have cleanup. Sorry, no avoiding that. Okay. One other thing, I'm going to kick it back over to summer here just to get the foliage back real quick. And this is something upcoming, and this is the age slider for the trees. I'm going to go ahead and click that, let it cache the tree data real quick. And what that'll help you do is kind of visualize the effect that the growth of trees will have, the impact they'll have on your facility there. So obviously when you're coming in and you're just putting them in, they're usually going to put them in as young trees, saplings, that kind of thing. And obviously young trees and saplings grow up. So something to consider. Now if you're trying to keep a nice view of your facility there, trees will keep growing unless you actually hinder their growth. There are ways to do that. But like I said, this is full grown here. If you want to keep it back, you'll want to try and limit the root growth. The drip line of the tree usually determines how far the roots go, and actually vice versa. So if you can restrict the roots, you can restrict how far the tree tends to go out. Also, other things to consider are if you have a big enough tree, if the root system is going to start affecting your sidewalk, you might want to have your planter boxes completely enclosed. Also, things like this with the Kosa dogwood, where it likes to branch outward, you're going to have somebody trim that fairly often, just to make sure you're not poking your your patrons in the eye as they come down the staircase. You can use, like I said, you can also use that in conjunction with your sun study to see what kind of shading you can get. So let's put the sun study up here. You're going to have a nice shaded walk coming through here. You're also going to have some of that shadow fall on your building depending on the time of day. And just real quick to show off something else here, I'm going to kick it over to spring again. You also may find that, I'm going to come over here, you might have a nice view through your windows as well. So yes, there's a parking structure back there, but it actually is kind of pretty. Okay, one last thing to look at. Due to the rise in safety and security concerns, it's a good idea to be able to simulate a closed-circuit television system. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go over to my CCTV option. I'm going to place a few cameras just to start with. You can actually set up an entire array with this, but I'm just going to do a few right now. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to place a large one right out here. And just one thing real quick. Another good place to put a security camera is right behind any kind of a cash register. So I'm just going to place one more right back in here. Alright. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter CCTV. Go ahead and adjust those cameras. So obviously this one I want pointing down at the registers. I'm going to have to back that up a couple just so that if anybody's here, you know, something's going on that's funny at the registers, both behind and in front, I can check that. And then over here for CCTV, I can check that corner. I'm going to back up a little on this one too, just so I can have a wide area on that. Later on, we're going to be able to display coverage cones also for these. So just FYI. And actually, now that I'm in here, I'm going to do one more thing, just because it popped into my head. Let's go ahead and jump over to my daylight settings, and I'm going to flip it over to night. So there we go. Nice starry night out. And let's jump back into CCTV and go to that main camera. So yeah, now that I'm looking at this from my security camera, I think this would be a safety concern for me. So I'm probably going to add some lighting back in this area, just so nobody can be hiding back there. So that's just a quick show of how you can use the closed-circuit television simulation system. So in this video, I've shared with you the basics of using Fuzor's validation and analysis tools to help you fully realize your project and get it ready for design approval. And that's just scratching the surface of what Fuzor has to offer. Along with the 2D, 3D spatial measurement and window analysis tools, Fuzor has what you need to maximize your productivity. Stay tuned for our next video where I'll be showing you Fuzor's upcoming work sharing capabilities. See you next time!